Welcome back, everybody. This is the third in our series of virtual discussions on water quality throughout the Western Lake Erie Basin. We're going to finish up this last hour from 11 to noon with some success stories, both rural and urban. And we're going to start right off with Andrew Allman. And I don't think Andrew's much different than our last two speakers, that they have lives, they've got businesses going on. Andrew is involved in another presentation right now, and he's going to have to jet out, but he's peeled off about 10 minutes for us. So Andrew, if you would, please introduce yourself and share your information about some successes on rural programs. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm Andrew Allman with the Ohio Agribusiness Association. I'm the operations director here. And OABA is the administrator for the our nutrient stewardship certification program in Western Lake Erie Basin in Ohio. So I'm the executive director of the program and work with my governing body, which is an 11-person council called the Nutrient Stewardship Council. So yeah, I'm going to talk about some of the successes within the Western Lake Erie Basin Ohio program. From my understanding, you heard from Amy Cornell earlier talking about the Indiana program, and it sounds like she got into some of the nuts and bolts of the requirements. So mine's going to be a little bit more high level, kind of taking you back to the start of the program, which was launched in 2014 in the Western Lake Erie Basin. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and just share a few slides with you. Okay. Are you all able to see the slides? I gotta switch back here real quick. Okay, are you able to see that slide there?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, bear with me for just 1 second here. I'm having a little hiccup.
While you're pulling that together, Andrew, I think it's worth the group knowing that Ohio's 4R program is a lot more mature than Indiana. And I don't know if they're absolutely the same, but you guys were out of the gates with a lot of support from the Natural Nature Conservancy. I think the Andersons over there. I don't want to cut anybody out, but we've been watching this program for a few years on the Indiana side.
Yeah. So actually, that goes into my slide here. So you should be able to see the timeline slide. So going back to just how did we get the program up and running? What were the challenges and basically the successes of the program? I think it makes sense to go back to the start. So you should see this timeline over here. And, as most of you know, August 2011, largest algal bloom to date occurs in the Western Lake Erie Basin. March of 2012, the Governor Kasek's administration calls for identification of actions actions to reduce nutrient runoff. So around this time, Carrie Volmer Sanders with the Nature Conservancy, she reached out to my boss, Chris Henney, who's the president and CEO of Ohio Agribusiness Association, to discuss voluntary measures and actions that the ag community could basically take to incorporate best management practices that address nutrient runoff issues. And more importantly, tell ag's story. There was a lot of programs that were geared towards farmers, whether that be state programs, federal programs, but there weren't a whole lot around that were based towards ag retailers. And from many studies that have been done, we know that ag retailers, independent crop consultants, and other professionals in the field, those are the most trusted advisors to the farmers. So by focusing on a smaller group, the ag retailers and the crop consultants, you could basically reach a larger audience. So one of the bases of the program, as it was created, was training and education. That's internal and external. So at one of the first advisory committee meetings, with all of this in mind, there was a retailer that raised his hand and said, hey, you know what, we should be the focus. And the ag retailers had a seat at the table. Farmers had a seat at the table. Research, university, government officials, you name it. Around that table, Chris and Carrie were able to gather all these groups together, which I think is pretty amazing. We've talked with other states that have discussed the opportunity of a certification program in their state or geography, and they said, how the heck did you get all these individuals in the room at the same time? So going back to those early successes, I think that's kind of number one there. So with all of this, the advisory committee created this industry-led voluntary audit program, It was backed by science, had a realistic approach, again, with all those stakeholders at the table. And it was suggested that for our sustainable nutrient management practices should be incorporated into this industry-led program. And that was mainly because the Fertilizer Institute got involved. So on a national level, they got involved on our local level very early on. So those that weren't really close to the program, they thought this was more reactionary to the Toledo water crisis in 2014. So you had legislators, regulators calling for immediate action, and there were questions thrown around like, why do we need phosphorus fertilizer in Western Lake Erie Basin? And so if the program would not have been created the previous 2 years and then launched in 2014 around the same time, we could have had some greater regulatory issues. And basically Ohio Senate Bill 1, which limits timing of nutrients, the application of nutrients, that language from Senate Bill 1 was basically adapted from the requirements of our program. So you talk about another success, that gave ag a seat at the table following the Toledo water crisis. So this program, it's an investment, time and money by participants. It's a pay-to-play situation. Many participants see this as basically a marketing expense to tell their story, to tell their farmer story, to tell ag story. And it's also goodwill, basically for a license to operate for the ag retailers, the crop consultants, and the farmers. Regulators and legislators appreciate the rigor of the program. And as you can see, I've got the program process up there for you. It's not just a check the box kind of program. It's not just a questionnaire, but it's very involved. It's an annual audit process that's conducted by a third party. And those are independent auditors with ag backgrounds. So with this pay-to-play situation, what's the progress of the program? So we had our first certification. I'm going back to the timeline here. First certification was earned in October 2014, and then the program expanded to the full state of Ohio and also to independent crop consultants in 2017. These potential participants showed interest and said, hey, we can't participate right now, but we really want to. And so it was just time for us to expand as a program. So a few years after the launch, we expand to the full state of Ohio. With audits, we have these annual audits that are required to maintain certification in the program. And this past year, posed certain challenges with these on-site audits. So we adapted, we moved towards some remote audit procedures. So even with the current environment's challenges, we had 10 new participants earn certification in roughly the past 15 months. So you talk about another win there, that's a great success from participation, because as what we're calling somewhat of a mature program compared to like Indiana's program that just launched over recent, you kind of reach some of those plateaus at certain points in time. So you try and figure out what are the needs of the program participants, what are the overall needs for the program and the ag industry in total. So with that, we've got 60 participants to date who have earned certification. We're approaching 6,000 farmers, about 3 million acres that are serviced by these certified retailers and the crop consultants. So program stakeholders, we're continually searching for the value adds for this voluntary program. In 2020, Governor DeWine's administration and ODA, Ohio Department of Agriculture, recognized the certification program by initiating a partnership for the H2 Ohio program, where 4 of our certified participants could submit nutrient management plans on behalf of their grower customers, and the plans would be streamlined. So therefore, the initial building blocks of H2 Ohio would be met by those working with certified program participants. So huge value add there, success for the program that it was recognized by our state officials, and really held that up for the program participants and the growers working with those program participants. Something that's key to the program, I mentioned before, training and education. So that's internal and external training that are built into requirements of the program. We were able to recently partner with the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and the program has been able to provide more outreach to encourage participation, as well as educational materials specifically around for our sustainable practices that will help participants meet these educational program requirements. There's various research projects that are underway through partnerships between, say, universities and researchers and certified participants and their growers. So we're trying to draw conclusions around 4R practices and participation in the program and water quality issues. And then on top of that, the program's nearing completion of creating a program management system. This is going to house all of our audit procedures and provide a platform to better understand aggregate practices by participants and their grower customers. With funding from the Fertilizer Institute, the Mosaic Company Foundation, Nutrien, and the Nature Conservancy, this web-based system is going to be available to all participating geographies. So the program started in the Western Lake Erie Basin, but now it's expanded greatly with initial expansion to Canada, the provinces of Ontario and Prince Edward Island, starting in 2017. You heard from Amy Cornell earlier, so Indiana has a few certified participants at this point in time, as well as New York. And then Florida and Minnesota are conducting their pilot phases, and Missouri's working on launching the program as well. So with Indiana's launch of the program in 2020, we had some participants that were considered in our program, the Western Lake Erie Basin, Ohio program. Those have transferred to Indiana, and we're in the process of transferring some more. But the biggest thing is the global program. So any geography that we're talking about, each program has to have 15 core requirements within their specific geography standards. So that way we have kind of the standard umbrella program with many different geographies participating. So I think the coolest thing for me is that this started in our backyard and now it's expanding basically on an international level into Canada. We've also gotten some interest from Australia and Africa. And so we're really hoping that we can keep expanding. You know, a challenge for anyone that I talk to and a challenge for our program basically is to encourage participation in the program. So reaching out to retailers, independent crop consultants that are eligible to participate and asking them maybe why they're not participating, or encouraging growers to pass that up the food chain to their retailers and say, hey, why aren't you participating in the program? So, you know, with all of that, if there's ever any questions or ever a want or need for partnering with the 4R Nutrient Stewardship Certification Program, whether that be in Indiana or Ohio or other states, feel free to reach out to me. And my contact information, I'm going to bring up our website here. So here's our website. All the participating geographies have their own section. Here's Ohio's here. This is Ohio's homepage. And then my contact information is right down here. And yeah, I just encourage you to kind of play around with the site, learn more about the program. And if there's any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Andrew. Very helpful. It's not so obvious what rural is doing on success stories. We've got a similar story here in Indiana, what we did quite a few years ago, but the fact that there was 2 years of grinding and hard work at pulling this program together, and then the unfortunate algal bloom at Toledo area, and they thought instantly this was a result of that. I guess the parallel I'll draw, because we'll get to some urban successes later on, we can see cool buildings and stuff in urban environments and say, oh, that's progress on water quality. But seeing a green field or the certification programs, that's not in plain view. And it's very helpful that you bring that to light, that there's a lot of work there. And I think that shows the value of the program, that you're expanding beyond Ohio, nationally, and even internationally. So Andrew, I know you probably have to run, but thank you very much for sharing that. And you keyed up just a little bit. Sandra Kosek-Sills, who will be with us here now to talk about the Ohio, the 2H Ohio initiative. And Sandra is with the the Ohio Lake Erie Commission. Sandra, we look forward to hearing what you have to share. Good morning.
Okay, good morning. Let me see if I can get this shared appropriately. All right. Okay, you should be seeing my screen. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay, so I really appreciate you guys inviting me to be here to speak today. I always feel like I learn more from meeting with folks in the upper watershed than I have to share with you. So I hope you find this interesting and informative. I do think that it's pretty well set up between what Chris Winslow was talking about with lake response, and I always appreciate hearing from the farming community with what Jamie had to say, some of the challenges with what the farmers are doing that we're trying to encourage, and just really find that information valuable. So I'm here mostly to talk today about the accomplishments of the H2 Ohio program. I appreciate being counted as a success story because we do feel like this has been a very successful program. And I want to set a little context for it. We have the Ohio Domestic Action Plan, which is Ohio's nutrient reduction plan under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. And there's more in the Domestic Action Plan than just what is in H2 Ohio. And in a similar way, there's more in H2 Ohio than just Lake Erie nutrient reduction. So I'm going to be talking more generally about H2 Ohio, but one piece of it is directly related to this nutrient reduction in the agricultural landscapes. So in H2 Ohio, we have multiple partners. We have the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Natural Resources, the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, and the Ohio Lake Erie Commission is serving as a coordinating role. Throughout the rollout of this program, the directors of these four agencies have been meeting on a regular basis every week to talk about how to make this program work and do all of these things that will improve water throughout Ohio. There's 5 general components to this program. The first one is the agricultural best management practices. There's also the wetland restoration and enhancement piece, and that's being overseen by DNR. Then we've got a community section that's for support for home sewage treatment system remediation. There's also a clean drinking water component that's looking at removal of lead lines, especially to daycares, but to provide resources for that to some of the urban areas. And then there's also a piece for enhanced rainfall and stream monitoring so that we can track what's happening out in the rivers. So starting with the Department of Agriculture, when they first conceived this program, there really was not much of a sense at ODA at how well it would be received by the farmers. The original goals that were set for this program were considerably lower than what ended up happening. When the meetings were held to roll the program out to the farm community, it was standing room only crowds, and they did end up with over 1 million acres in these 14 counties in the Maumee watershed that are enrolled for these nutrient management plans that was mentioned previously. So really exciting to see that's a substantial portion of Ohio's part of the Maumee watershed. And we have high hopes that this is then going to make it easier for all of these farmers, even if they don't take an active next step to get a further program out of H2 Ohio, that it will be a good education for everyone and help with the development of these plans so that it's not a big lift that they all have to do just by themselves. And that gave us nearly 2,000 producers participating in the program. So it was a great outreach opportunity as well. Along with that, you can see here in the big chunk of the blue pie chart, like I said, just over 1 million acres just in the nutrient management plans. But we also have a range of other practices that are have programs that are being funded under H2 Ohio, and they also had some really good signups for that. So over 400,000 acres in cover crops, over 152,000 acres in conservation crop rotation, 165,000 acres in manure incorporation, 306,000 into better placement for the fertilizer, and then over 484,000 acres for variable rate application. And all of those are programs that are paying farmers per acre for the practices being used. And the hope is that the farmers will be able to make the improvements in their soil health and see the reduction in costs to their farm inputs that will help make this a more sustainable program to where it does not have to be something that the state is funding consistently into perpetuity, but to sort of get everybody over that initial hump. For what DNR is doing, they're putting in the wetlands. This is specifically wetland creation for the reduction of nutrients. Although wetlands also have habitat creation aspect to them, that's not really the focus of what's happening, although it will also be a side benefit. Chris Winslow mentioned that there's the Ohio Learn going on that is providing a scientific basis for measuring the nutrient reduction that would occur through these wetlands. So there's been a couple $1 million put towards that. They have 26 wetlands projects under contract. A number of them are pretty far along in their construction already. That'll give us somewhere around 60,000 acres of agricultural watershed that's going to get filtered through these wetlands. Quite a few nonprofit conservation partners engaged. That's the Land Conservancies, the Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, a whole bunch of folks have been involved as they have their own individual projects. And so a fairly good chunk of money here and over 3,000 acres that will be restored. Ohio Environmental Protection Agency is doing a whole range of projects that relate to the water quality piece. And so not all of this is directly relevant to the nutrient reduction part of it. They're also doing the lead service line replacement, and they're doing some upgrading of water infrastructure in underserved areas. And some of those are in the Ohio River watershed. The H2 Ohio is a statewide, not just a Lake Erie program. But we also did, and specifically in here, there will be some home sewage treatment system upgrades that will be happening, and that is happening in counties of the Maumee watershed. And we did pay for increased number of rain gauges. So Mark Williams spoke earlier this morning about looking at the rainfall. Well, there's a bit of a lack of rainfall gauges in Northwest Ohio. So that creates an issue, not just for the modeling and the information that we need to talk about agricultural practices, but it also was creating a bit of a problem for the National Weather Service in trying to do flood forecasting, because they like to have real-time information on rainfall so that they can get a good idea if there's going to be flooding downstream. So we've put in some money for that, and also a little bit of stream monitoring, particularly in some of the Ohio River watersheds where there hasn't been very much monitoring. So, you know, just to kind of pull it all together, a lot of big numbers, very good participation from our farming community, a lot of good projects in the wetlands area, people stepping up with, you know, hey, I've got a little chunk of property over here that floods so often, I might as well just turn it into a wetland, and a lot of participation in that regard. And so we've just been really pleased overall with the start of the program. We did get a little bit delayed with some of it because of coronavirus. There was some great deal of nervousness with the state budget partway through the rollout of this, but they were able to hang on to the funding for year one, and those practices are being supported now this spring. So we should start to see more of these practices roll out for this year, and we've got our fingers crossed. It'll be really interesting to look at the monitoring data as it comes out for the rivers this spring and through the summer, and to see if we are seeing some measurable changes yet. A little bit early in the program. We do have money for year two, which would be next spring. And the governor's new budget is also proposing to not just continue H2 Ohio, but to enhance it somewhat for the following 2 years in 2023 and 2024. So it's looking pretty good to do multiple years of this program. I know there's also been some movement in the legislature to set up a longer term bond issue that would make this program a little bit more immune to the vagaries of the budget process and economic conditions. So thank you for your attention. If you want to read all of the details or get those numbers in a format that you can just hang on to, there's a link here. If you go to h2.ohio.gov, you can download the report for the accomplishments for fiscal year 2020, and we expect to have the report for 2021 provided to the legislature in August of 2021. Thank you, and I can take questions.
Sandra, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. You've got a lot of projects that are going. I just want to put a spotlight on a couple comments that you made that I think is a common theme here. First of all, standing room only when you first brought it out, and that's going to be a little bit of a segue into the urban success. We've done some things here in the Fort Wayne area, starting to bring people to rivers who most of them just kind of had the ew factor. And one of the very first public meetings we had, it was standing room only. It just bowled them over. And what that leads to is you made the comment that a lot of this is education and outreach, and we're hoping that these opportunities that we provide, for us in the urban areas to get the people to the rivers, in the rural areas and agriculture, what are some of these practices that we can assist you with to learn? The idea and the phrase you used was to get them over the hump, get them over that first educational piece, because I heard this phrase a while ago and I thought it was the dumbest thing I ever heard until I really started thinking about it, is we don't know what we don't know. And when we provide these opportunities to get that education out and we find the key people who can benefit from it, we just don't know what light bulbs are going to turn on there. And by some of your results and some of the acreages you've got and the funding and the involvement and the people, sounds like you're headed on the right path with this one. I appreciate that. Both Andrew and Sandra shared some great success stories in the rural area on what we're doing for water quality. So we're going to take a shift here, and we're going to listen to two folks that are involved in the economic development realm. In Fort Wayne, we have Stacy Haviland with us, and in Ohio, in Defiance, we've got Erika Willitzer with us. So we're going to start off with Stacy. And Stacy, I'm not going to take any time to introduce what you're doing, but I think your expertise before you came to the city of Fort Wayne is worth sharing, because I think that lends right into what you're doing there. So we'll start off Stacy Haviland with the city of Fort Wayne. She is the Community Development Administrator. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I'm hoping you can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, so like Dan mentioned, I do have a background before I came to the city. I'm a landscape architect, and I worked for a private consulting firm locally in Fort Wayne. We worked as a consultant to the city of Fort Wayne with the city utilities rain garden program. So I was instrumental in designing a lot of the demonstration gardens, getting those implemented, and still to this day, even as the city employee, I host and facilitate the homeowner rain garden workshop program. So it's been maybe 12 years in the going now that we've been giving homeowners just 3.5 hour long workshops on what they need to do to install rain gardens in their own home to be able to improve our water quality. So then that kind of ties into more of the stuff I've been doing with the city. I'm like I said, I'm a landscape architect, so I've been doing streetscape stuff, but much more near and dear to my heart is all the work in the riverfront. I've been tasked with implementing phase 2 and hopefully eventually phase 3 of our riverfront plans. Phase 2 is currently in design. But what I get to share with you today is some of the success from phase 1, which is our Promenade Park, and tell you all the success that brought about. I'm going to try to bring up a presentation here. Okay, hopefully you guys can all see the slides now.
Yep, very good.
So phase 1 of our riverfront development, this is for public open space, began with Promenade Park. So it is this space that I'm outlining with the mouse right now. This is Harrison Street, Superior Street, and Wells Street. This was all industrial parking. There's a river greenway that runs along the south side of the St. Mary's River, but you can tell here in the vegetation, I've got a picture that'll show it better, thanks to Dan. You really couldn't see or access the river from here. You're riding right along it, but you don't even know that the river is there. And then also phase one includes a canopy tree walk along the north side of the river and a playground. So this was before, and I just wanted to show you, it's an industrial site, lots of hard pavement. So now this is a current day view from Google Maps. Again, here's that park space. There is a pavilion here that is rented out every weekend of this year. It's so successful that everybody loves the park. Everybody wants to use the park. But you can see so much more green space in the park itself. And there's now access to the river. We've got a boat dock, all this stair step stuff. Again, pictures you'll be able to see better here in a minute. The tree canopy trail along the north side and the playground over here. So this has been hugely successful for a lot of reasons. Here's that before picture with all the vegetation along the river. You can't even see that there's a river in there. These guys were clearing away some of this, and it's a big undertaking. They had a lot to clear. And then here's another before picture. These guys at least know where it's at. They're on the river enjoying it, but anybody on the land side, they don't even know it's in here. So again, there's that heavy vegetation. There's a trail behind it, and you see the industrial buildings. But now here's the after. This is Promenade Park. This picture is taken from the day of grand opening. I think this is all the staff prepping for grand opening day, actually. But you can see that vegetation's been removed. You can actually see the river from the land. So now we know it's there. We can bring people down to the river and we can start to celebrate the river. Also, there's a lot more green space in here. I don't know if you can notice all the trees in the background, but just that alone will help improve the water quality by soaking up some of that stormwater. And if I go back, there's a bioswale that runs all the way through the park that picks up all of the stormwater runoff. So we don't have any from this site entering the river. So the park does lots of different things, a lot for stormwater quality and a lot for celebrating the river, like making people aware that it's here. This is the coolest shot. This is grand opening night. Look at all the people. I love to see this. So when we talk about, improving water quality and what it does for economic development, I mean, this is local tourism at its best. Look at all the people that came to town, and that was a weekend long event, not just a snapshot on one day. It was a weekend long thing. And especially with COVID, there are so many people in the park because you don't have anywhere else to go. They're outside, they're socially distanced. That park has been busy all the time. So this is a huge success, at least in my opinion. I think others would agree. What that also does, going back to this slide just so I can show you, what we were hoping and planned for was that once we implemented some public improvements along the river, that private development would come. So if we were to spend public money on public improvements, we can have private development come and help our economy in that sense. So again, here's the park. Here is a current construction site for a private development. It's currently underway. And then note this little piece, I'll talk about this too. This is phase 2A for our riverfront public space. But all of this site is slated for a private development. Here's the picture. You can see all the different stats with that. It is mixed use. We'll have living units, a lot of commercial space, and most importantly at this point, at least to me, because I'm dealing with the parking issues, 912 space parking garages proposed here. That construction site facilitated parking while it sat vacant for a while. And now that we took that parking away to make a parking garage, we're under a bit of a parking crunch. But when it's done, it'll be fabulous. The garage is slated to be completed early next year, and then the residential and commercial the following year. So again, that's almost $90 million worth of investment, all because we put in money for that public improvement. So adjacent to that, on the north side of that private development, this is phase 2A. Again, more public open space. This does a couple of different things. This site currently is a construction site for city utilities improvements. They're currently building a drop shaft and sewer works that actually go under the river and tie into the neighborhood. That drop shaft goes to the tunnel for all of their stormwater improvements. I believe Anne-Marie Smirchek talked to you guys the last go around of this series. So a lot of city utility improvements here to work on improving the water quality. Along with that, this park supports the development, the Barrett and Stokely development. I'll mention Barrett and Stokely are based out of Indianapolis. They have a development in Carmel along the Monon Trail. And they saw the momentum behind our riverfront and thought, you know what, let's get in on that. They see the riverfront as an amenity just like the Monon Trail, which I think is pretty cool. When they first started looking at this, they liked the adjacency to the river and said that they usually plan for storage units with their living units and would make sure that there's enough room in their storage units for kayaks. How cool is that? So I'm hoping it's still designed that way by the time it got through all the iterations. But so this park supports that. There's room for the people that live in this development to access the river, but more importantly, it's room for everybody to access the river. So it's not private development that fronts the river. There's still room for everyone to access the river, which is super cool. Also, this park space has been designed with a bioswale, so it picks up all the stormwater runoff from the site and some of the stormwater runoff from the developed site. And we're treating that through the bioswale before it would enter the river, which I think is also nice that we can incorporate those when we're talking about water quality. Another point of private development and boosting the local economy, just a block and a half away, this private development, again, Barrett and Stokely, slated to start construction later this year. So again, another $67 million invested into our community, all because of this riverfront work that we're doing. Maybe not all because, but we'd like to claim that at least. So then I just wanted to point out the rest of what we're currently working on. So this is phase 2 riverfront development. And I don't expect you to be able to see the full map on here. But again, this is the St. Mary's River flowing through here. This is Promenade Park, phase 1. So phase 2, we're working on this piece right here next to the development. But we're also looking at this stretch all along the north bank and a piece on the west side of Promenade, both sides of the river there. So what I hope you'll be able to see from this, though, is that there's plenty of green space. And again, public access for everybody to see and use the riverfront. There's areas for boat docks and get downs so that we can access the river. But we're also preserving and enhancing the wetlands so that, again, we can protect and improve the water quality. So instead of just turning our back to it or putting a hard edge so that we clean it up in an urban environment, we're allowing that wetland to remain, and we're putting boardwalks through there so that people can come and see the wetland and hopefully appreciate it for what it is. And then phase 3 moves on a little further to the west, and that area is slated to be much more natural development, meaning more wetlands that can flood. As the river fluctuates, we've got space for that to happen without trying to hard armor that out of there. So just wanted to share some of that and then open that up for discussions. I know Erika has some to share as well.
Stacy, thank you very much for that. I think what we're going to do is we've got a couple thoughts here, but I'm going to hold them until Erika shares a little bit. And I just want to set the stage a little bit here. In Promenade, when we first started talking about that, a lot of folks, when they hear the word development, they think brick and mortar. And now, we saw a fair amount of big buildings, 60 million plus for each one of those going in. But Stacy did a nice job of emphasizing all the green space, all the space for the public to get to. These developments are not going to be right up the water's edge, so we still are going to share it with people. And what that ties into are two things. Number one, the very industrial look of where Promenade Park is now. I'm the guy that was down there cleaning. I can tell you with all honesty, there were 5 trees on that property. All the rest was invasives. Those 5 trees are still there, and they are now partnered with over 100 more trees planted just on that side, and another big number like that on the north bank. So there's a lot of effort to bring green back downtown, to capture the storm water, because we kind of started off sunny days, we don't have a problem at all, but it's when we have this rainwater that seems to overpower our systems. And we had officials from Defiance County to Fort Wayne, I'm going to say 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. Defiance has 3 rivers. Defiance has some conceptual plans, and they are also downstream of us, so we want to be good stewards of them. So Erika, why don't you share a little bit with us as the Economic Development Director for Defiance County, what's cooking over there in Defiance? Erika,
Okay,
Willitzer.
sure. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen real quick.
Great.
Okay, so can you guys see this? This is not Defiance, by the way. This is, I just kind of wanted to kind of set it up how I got to Defiance. I was doing community development, economic development in other counties that did not have rivers. And when I interviewed for the position, which I am new to the position, just started in January of this year, I think one of the reasons that I actually got the job was because I talked about how we really need to emphasize what an asset our rivers are. And so I told them, like, let's dream big. You know, here's an image in Charlotte, North Carolina that I thought was amazing. Here was another one that was in Oklahoma City. And I really just wanted to drive home the point that one of the things that we have that's a huge economic giant that we're not tapping into is the rivers. Well, then once I get into getting the position, I'm finding out there are a lot of plans underway. We're nowhere near at the stage that Fort Wayne is at, but I will tell you, you guys are our inspiration, and it's really nice seeing all the stuff that you guys have going on there, because it just makes us want to keep on trying to pursue what we want to do. And I think one of the things that people don't realize when I was actually interviewing and researching for the position was just how much outdoor recreation actually brings to economic development. And I found this actually on AmericanRivers.org when I was applying for the position, and I brought that to the board. And I just thought it was very interesting. And I wanted to make sure that I drove home that point. I think you guys all know on this call. So I get into the position, and what I find out is that there's all sorts of people in leadership roles throughout the city of Defiance that have been planning and trying to figure out how we can leverage the rivers. So here's one of their conceptual drawings. One of the neatest aspects that I think that they have going on, and it's still up for debate because it is an expensive endeavor, is this tridge. It's the little crossy thing there. It's in the middle there. And so just to try to create that walkability throughout our downtown areas and connect everything together. One of the other cool things that our city is doing is they're working on a Native American park and a tribute to Native Americans. And this, again, it's just a concept, but you can almost see how it represents that culture. So we're pretty excited about that. But like Stacy said, there's obviously a lot that goes into it, not just even from like the concept part. What our city administration is doing is they're right now buying different properties, laying the groundwork, and what is going to hopefully end up happening is just a revitalization. A couple other key points that I wanted to drive home is that I feel like the rivers equal spending, and I'm a prime example of that. So my daughter, who's in college, comes home, brings some of her roommates home with her, and she's like, well, what are we gonna do? And I'm like, well, we could go kayaking, but I didn't have kayaks. So I go to the local outdoor store. honestly spent more than I wanted to, maybe around $1,500. But I thought this could be something we just do all summer long. We get done kayaking. From there, we go and we get pizza. From there, we went and got ice cream. And what I think that we will see, and we are seeing, businesses are starting to come down to our downtown area because they're seeing this development. Our city officials are removing a lot of the vegetation that had overgrown. And what we're experiencing is that there's just this overall buy-in. They're taking trails and they're starting to see the river. And what that's doing, it's allowing the regular residents to get behind doing the master plan that we had suggested. So I think that for too long, we've underestimated the value of the rivers and how it relates to economic development. And I'm even actually seeing that from an industry perspective too. Currently, we're working with a company, and I've been in economic development for about 10 years. But what I'll tell you is, when I first started, I never would get questions like, what is your community doing to improve water quality? What are some of your initiatives when it comes to parks and trails? What are some of the amenities? Now, as an economic developer, and I love it, we are actually getting those questions. And I do firmly believe one of the projects that we're working on now, if we end up getting it, it's going to be because of the water quality, and what a great job our administration, Adam, has done at the water plant in order to land such companies. But I think things are changing in that direction, and I'm so excited about it. The other thing too, that again, we're just in the beginning stages, but we're really excited because this will be the first year we actually have a company now that's going to be operating outside of our parks. Then they have a couple other areas that they're going to be operating out of, and they're going to be renting kayaks and pontoons. So very shortly, if not here soon, we're going to really start seeing our rivers come to life. And I think from an economic development standpoint, which a lot of times people think is just so focused on industry, which it is, that other component is key, and the rivers are key. And I'm really excited to be in a community where we have the rivers to leverage for greater things, specifically quality of life.
Erika, thank you very much. That's very inspiring. I like your phrase that rivers equal money or equal spending or something like that.
Yep.
One of the comments that just came in while both of you were presenting was identifying the difference between development and conversion. So that may sound like an odd term, but it's sort of what I started off with. Is initially when people think of development, they think of that hard edge, hard surface. Oh no, more rainwater is going into the river and this is just going to be horrible. But in both plans, both in Fort Wayne and Defiance, you see that green space. You see those ability to bring in some best management practices to begin to teach people, sort of like Sandra talked about. It's an opening point to be able to discuss, well, what's this bioswale? What does that mean? What are we doing here? And you begin to open up that conversation about water quality and how everybody has a piece to play. What I have found, and Erika touched on this a little bit as well, and we found this locally, that you've got your leaders in the community. They're not only your legislative and elected leaders, but you've got your business leaders who are looking to grow and strengthen the community so they have the type of employees that they need. And when we have these seemingly very simple amenities, a trail and a green space along the river, then you pop out and buy some kayaks as something to do. Now we've got willing voters that when a proposal comes up that may need additional funding, I would say tax increase or whatever shape it may take, then these leaders are knowing that they've got the votes behind them. They've got the people that begin to understand it. They haven't been told why it's important. They have experienced for themselves why it is important to do that. So I think that gives them the political will to move out, move forward. Yeah. So I want to just take a broad stroke here and try to pull everything back together from the science to the beginning and the rural and the urban. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning that the impacts and solutions that we have are both rural and urban. You know, we've got those two realms we're working in. Our folks in the rural communities, they come to the urban communities to recreate and entertain. So what we do here emboldens them. What rural communities do has a big impact on what the water looks like coming through our urban communities. So it really is a partnership there that makes a lot of sense. I think the challenge, and as Chris Winslow pointed out early on, the majority of our land use is rural. And several speakers have said, we are not here pointing fingers or laying blame, but it's these efforts in the rural area that are going to have the largest impacts on water quality. Unfortunately, most people don't understand or see those efforts, like the 4R program and the producers signing on and getting involved in that. Incorporating nutrients, doing no-till, planting cover crops. That's not real obvious. That's not real sexy, but that makes big impacts. I come to a community like Fort Wayne, spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on reworking the sewers and a deep rock tunnel project, and nobody is ever going to see that. And that's an awful hard sell for a price tag that big. But what they will see and learn and know is the improved water quality, which is the whole reason we're here, is to get that better for not only the citizens, but Erika just touched on that we are a really water-rich area, which at sometimes is problems. And that was pointed out by Mark Williams, that we're having more rainfall, more severe events. But the fact that we've got a high quantity of water that's available, we're beginning to attract those businesses that need that. And that's the sort of industry that's going to create jobs for us. So the rural BMPs, they're going to continue to have impacts on water qualities. The urban opportunities where we get people out so they can learn about it, that's just going to be a win-win for everybody else down the road. I want to thank everybody for joining us. This has been a very enlightening and informational session. These will be broken out into sessions for those who would want to go to our website. We'll have links to those once we get them boiled down a little bit. A lot of good science and information has come out. And so along with thanking those who have helped support this, the Allen County, Indiana, SWCD, the Nature Conservancy, and the USDA NRCS, the Maumee Watershed Alliance will be putting on a final River Summit 3 event this September. It's planned for September 15 and 16, and this will be a live event, but I'm certain that since technology is there, there will be a virtual component to it. But we will be at Promenade Park that Stacy had shared with you a little bit. It's a beautiful facility. We'll be there in the evening, kind of a very high level kickoff event down there. And then on Thursday, the 16th, we will be at the Grand Wayne Center. And we will be bringing in speakers from around the country. And I want to just highlight one. This was an EPA administrator that was overlooking the Chesapeake that had to bring together 5 different state agencies, rural communities, urban communities. And he's got a very strong message of can-do and partnerships. And that was a real solid theme coming through with H2 Ohio and everybody else's work, is you got to get everybody at the table collaborating to come together to have this winning spirit. So again, we've got one more thing on River Summit 3 this year. That will be September 15 and 16 downtown in Fort Wayne. Information can be picked up as we build it through the Allen County SWCD's website or the Maumee Watershed Alliance website. So again, thank you everybody for joining us today, sharing your knowledge, and keep up the good work. It's all headed in the right direction. Thank you.